It is the year 1704. You are in the middle of the Atlantic, miles from any visible shore. The sun beats down mercilessly. The smell of damp wood, melted tar, and human sweat mixed with the salt in the air fills every breath you take. Beneath your feet, oak planks creak rhythmically as the ship's hull rises and falls over waves that never seem to tire. You are not a passenger. You are part of the crew. And this ship does not sail under any king's or empire's flag. This ship belongs to everyone and to no one. Most people imagine a pirate ship as a place of pure chaos. Drunken men shouting, orders enforced at sword point, a cruel captain ruling with an iron fist while the rest obey out of fear. It's a powerful image. It's also almost completely wrong, because the truth about how a pirate ship actually operated is one of the most surprising and counterintuitive stories that the Golden Age of Piracy, between 1680 and 1730, has to tell. And the question that will guide everything you're about to discover is this: how did a group of men living outside the law, without a government, without an army, and without a court manage to maintain order, distribute wealth, and operate a machine as complex as an ocean-going sailing ship for months on end? The answer will change the way you see not only piracy, but the very nature of human organization. Let's start at the beginning, with the ship itself. When you think of a pirate galleon from the movies, you probably picture a huge, imposing vessel with dozens of cannons and massive sails. The reality was different. Most pirates preferred smaller, faster, and more maneuverable ships. The favorites were the sloop or the light frigate, vessels that could approach merchant ships quickly, change direction with agility, and, when necessary, disappear into shallow waters where warships couldn't follow. Speed meant survival. A slow pirate ship was a dead pirate ship. But even on these smaller ships, the operational complexity was immense. Think about everything that had to work at the same time. Sails adjusted to the wind with surgical precision, ropes and pulleys under constant tension, water pumps operated manually to drain the hull, cannons prepared and positioned, supplies managed, routes calculated without GPS or satellites, only with stars, compass, clock, and experience. And all of this was carried out by a crew that, most of the time, was made up of men who had deserted from Royal Navy ships, escaped forced labor contracts, or simply chosen this life as the only alternative that made sense to them. These men were no fools. In many cases, they were the most experienced sailors on the ocean, because the worst sailors simply didn't survive on the open sea long enough to become pirates. The selection was brutal and natural, and it was precisely this collective experience that gave rise to something no historian expected to find when they began studying the documents from that era. A sophisticated governance structure written, signed, and enforced with a seriousness that would put many modern organizations to shame. It was called the Ship's Article. Before any ship set sail, before any flag was raised, every crew member would gather on deck and listen to, or read if they could, a set of rules that defined exactly how that ship would operate. Who would get what share of the loot? Which behaviors were forbidden? What would happen to those who broke the rules? How decisions would be made? And, fundamentally, who was in charge and under what conditions that power could be revoked? Because yes, pirates could fire the captain. This wasn't the exception, it was the rule. The captain of a pirate ship was elected by the crew and could be removed by the crew through a majority vote. His absolute authority existed only in two situations: during battle or escape, when hesitation meant death, and during severe storms, when every second counted. Outside of those situations, the captain was more of an executive leader than an absolute sovereign. He didn't eat better than the others, nor did he sleep in private quarters while the crew rotted in the hold. On many documented ships, the captain received 1.5 shares of the loot. The rest received a full share each. The difference was small, and that was intentional. The person who actually managed the day-to-day operations of the ship was the boatswain, the first mate, as we would say today. He was the one who assigned the work, resolved minor conflicts, supervised the condition of the vessel, and ensured that rations were distributed fairly. It was a position of enormous practical responsibility, and on many pirate ships, it was the boatswain who held more real power than the captain himself during times of calm. You're probably wondering, but how did all of this actually work in practice? How did men living outside the law, with no external authority to turn to, actually manage to uphold these agreements? The answer lies in something much more powerful than any written law. Self-interest aligned with the collective interest. Every pirate on that ship knew that his own enrichment depended directly on the proper functioning of the collective machine. A man who stole from the common loot before the official division was not just breaking a rule, he was attacking the livelihood of each of his companions. And in an environment where there was no police, no court, and no available prison, punishment was administered by the peers themselves, on the spot, with no possible appeal. This created an extremely effective system of mutual oversight. Everyone watched everyone else, not out of blind loyalty, but because the system made vigilance personally advantageous. The articles of agreement from real pirate ships that have survived to this day, such as those of the famous pirate Bartholomew Roberts, active in the early 18th century, reveal fascinating details. It was forbidden to play cards or dice for money on board to prevent one crew member from impoverishing another before even reaching their destination. Lights and candles had to be extinguished by 8 o'clock at night, and anyone who wanted to keep drinking had to do so on the open deck, not in the closed cabins, where a careless act could set the entire ship on fire. Fights and physical aggression between crew members were prohibited on board. If two men had a serious dispute, it would be settled on land in a regulated duel with witnesses and rules. Even violence was bureaucratized. There was also social protection, a concept we associate with the 20th century, but which pirates practiced 300 years earlier. If a man lost an arm in combat, he would receive a compensation in gold previously established in the article. Losing the right hand was worth more than losing the left. Losing an eye had its fixed price. Losing both legs guaranteed an amount that would allow the man to live with some dignity on land. It was a primitive system of life and disability insurance, created by men who had never studied economics, but who perfectly understood shared risk. Now think for a moment about the contrast. In the same years that these pirates sailed with their written constitutions and voting systems, sailors in the British Royal Navy lived under radically different conditions. Many had been forcibly recruited, literally kidnapped in ports, and waking up in the middle of the ocean, already forced to serve. They received miserable wages, paid months or even years late. They were punished with public lashings for minor infractions. They had no say in decisions, no share in the profits from cargo captured during wars. They were, in every practical sense of the word, temporary property of the crown. That's why piracy recruits so well. Not because men were naturally evil or lawless, but because the legal alternative was objectively worse in almost every measurable aspect of daily life. When a sailor deserted a Navy ship to join a pirate ship, he wasn't necessarily choosing crime. In many cases, he was choosing democracy, protection, a share in the profits, and basic dignity, things that the legal system of the time simply did not offer him. Now let's go back inside the ship, because that's where the true complexity of the operation is revealed. Imagine the hold. It's dark, damp, hot in the Caribbean and freezing in the North Atlantic. The smell is unbearable to any nose not used to it. Salted meat in barrels, hard biscuits infested with weevils, stagnant water in wooden casks that starts to rot weeks after departure. Rats are constant companions, and not necessarily unwanted, because rats abandoning a ship en masse are a sign that the hull is sinking. Every experienced sailor knew how to read this sign. Food supply was one of the greatest logistical challenges of any long voyage. Without refrigeration, food would spoil in a predictable sequence. In the first days, there was fresh bread and decent meat. In the following weeks, hard biscuits and salted meat to the point of being almost toxic. After a month, any fruit or vegetable was gone and scurvy began to appear. Bleeding gums, teeth falling out, bones aching as if the body itself were falling apart from the inside. Pirates operating in the Caribbean had an advantage over those sailing the open oceans. They could dock on islands more frequently, restock with tropical fruits and fresh water, and reduce the time exposed to the worst conditions of a long crossing. The ship's cook, called cook in English and simply cozinheiro in Portuguese, held a socially curious position on board. He was one of the few crew members who did not actively participate in combat, often because he was older or had some physical limitation. Not rarely, he was a man who had lost a leg in a previous battle and found in this role a way to remain useful and continue receiving his share of the loot. Taking care of a good cook was a collective survival strategy. A well-fed crew member performs better, fights less, and gets sick less often. And falling ill was a constant threat, far more lethal than any enemy cannon. Modern historical studies on mortality during maritime voyages of the period show that for every sailor killed in combat, approximately 5 died from diseases. Yellow fever, dysentery, scurvy, infections from wounds without antibiotics. The ship was in many ways an environment of extremely high biological risk. The ship's surgeon, when there was one, worked with instruments that would make any doctor today recoil in horror. Saws for amputations performed without anesthesia, heated iron cauteries to stop bleeding, and a pharmacy made up mainly of rum, tar, and hope. All of this, the food, health, navigation, combat, the division of loot, had to work in sync so that the ship could reach its destination with enough crew to remain operational. And this is where we arrive at the most underestimated element of the entire pirate operation: information. A pirate ship was above all an intelligence-gathering machine. Pirates didn't just sail aimlessly across the ocean hoping to stumble upon a wealthy ship by accident. That would be financial and logistical suicide. They operated based on information networks that were surprisingly sophisticated for their time. Neutral ports, taverns on remote islands, merchants who turned a blind eye in exchange for a cut. All of them functioned as nodes in an informal intelligence network that circulated information about merchant ship routes, valuable cargoes, departure dates, and mandatory waypoints. When a pirate ship captured a vessel, the first thing they did was not loot the hold, but interrogate the captain and crew. Which ships have you seen in the past few days? Where were they headed? What were they carrying? What was their planned route? This information was sometimes worth more than the cargo itself. A good piece of intelligence could lead the crew directly to a ship loaded with Spanish silver. Bad information or a poorly calculated route meant weeks lost at sea, consuming provisions, wearing down the hull, and eroding the crew's morale, because morale, that intangible thing so rarely mentioned in history books, was perhaps the most precious resource on board. A pirate ship with a demotivated crew was a ship that voted to depose the captain, that bred internal fights, that made bad decisions at critical moments. Experienced captains knew this and cultivated morale with the same care they gave to maintaining the hull. Musicians on board were not a luxury, they were an investment. Rum distributed at the right moments was not a weakness, it was management. Stories told at night on the deck, under stars unspoiled by light pollution, creating a sense of collective identity among men of different backgrounds, languages, and histories. This was leadership just as real as any battle order. And here we come to the moment when we need to pause and be honest about something that the romantic narrative of piracy often omits. This life killed early. The life expectancy of an active pirate during the Golden Age was brutally low. Most of the most famous pirates in history operated for less than 5 years before being captured, killed in combat, dying of disease, or simply disappearing from the records. Bartholomew Roberts, considered the most successful pirate of the period, capturing more than 400 ships in less than 4 years, was killed in combat in 1722 at the age of 40. An age that, by the standards of the time, was already respectable, but which he reached while living in constant danger of death. Most of his crew members were much younger when they died. Freedom had a price, and that price was collected with interest. Those who survived long enough to accumulate wealth faced another problem: where to spend it. Legitimate ports would hang them. Territories controlled by empires hunted them down. The islands and coves that served as bases, Nassau in the Bahamas, Tortuga in the Caribbean, Madagascar in the Indian Ocean, offered temporary refuge, but never permanent safety. Money earned in months of risk was often spent in just a few days on land. Not out of childish irresponsibility, but because saving wealth without a bank, without legal property, and without legal protection was practically impossible. Spending now was rational when tomorrow was uncertain. It's a small detail, but it reveals something enormous about the human condition under extreme pressure. When the future is not guaranteed, the present expands and consumes everything. And it is here, at this point of tension between the collective intelligence these men demonstrated and the cruelty of the reality surrounding them, that the story of the pirate ship becomes something more than just an adventure. It becomes a mirror. Because what pirates built in the middle of the ocean, without a state, without external law, and without a safety net, was a fundamental human response to a question that every society needs to answer. How do people with individual interests create systems that work for everyone? How can power be distributed in a way that it doesn't corrupt those who hold it? How do you maintain cohesion when everything around you pushes toward chaos? They didn't get everything right. Far from it. There was violence, injustice, exploitation, especially toward captives and the populations of the regions they plundered. A dark dimension that cannot be ignored or romanticized. But within the ship, among those who had signed the articles, there was a system that worked with remarkable effectiveness, and it was created not by philosophers or statesmen, but by men whom the ocean had forced to think clearly about what truly mattered in order to survive together. The lesson that spans 300 years and reaches you today is not that pirates were heroes. It is that organizational intelligence is not the privilege of any class, any nation, or any era. It arises from necessity, accumulated experience, and the willingness to create systems that align individual interests with the collective. When these three conditions come together, human beings build astonishing things, even in the middle of the ocean, even outside the law, even with nothing more than wood, wind, and collective will. The next time you see a black flag with a skull in a movie or as a carnival costume, remember that behind that symbol there were signed contracts, voted assemblies, insurance systems, intelligence networks, and an imperfect democracy sailing in waters that no empire ever managed to fully control. The ocean belonged to everyone. And for a brief moment in history, some men took that seriously. If this video surprised you with something you didn't expect to learn about pirates, leave a comment telling us which detail impressed you the most. I bet most people will mention the disability insurance, and that makes perfect sense. If you've made it this far, you already know it's totally worth clicking like and subscribing to the channel, because every week there's a story like this waiting for you. And if you want to keep going on this journey, the next video will show you what life was like aboard a ship of the British Royal Navy. Then you'll understand even better why so many men preferred to risk everything on the open sea.